5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. We're going to talk about some complicated stuff today. Complicated stuff. And what we're going to do is start with an MIT Technology Review article, which is an opinion on AI. And I've held this opinion for decades, literally decades, because I work with an algorithm, CHAID, chi-squared automatic interaction detector. And when I do that, and people go, oh, that's been around forever. That can't possibly be interesting. Well, so has RFM, and people are still using that. Anyway, so let's dig into this article a little bit, and we'll move through into direct mail and into a case study. So not much news today, but maybe you'll learn something. The authors, and Hannah Kerner, excellent article, I would say, excellent. Hannah says that when authors present this is a criticism that she's gotten on her papers. The authors present a solution for an original and highly motivating problem, but it is an application and the significance seems limited for the machine learning community. In other words, they're just using some algorithm that's been around a while, and all they did was solve a big problem. So who cares about that? That's exactly what they're saying. Maybe they're just making a lot of money. And that's not interesting. No. And she says this is applied to pretty much all the papers that are interesting as far as actually solving world's problems. The community feels that high impact problem solving is of limited significance. And I can tell you, if you hire a data scientist, a PhD, you may get a similar approach. Netflix had a system that worked, and they offered $1 million to beat it. And somebody eventually beat it, but it was such a complicated solution that it wasn't worth doing, right? Their simple solution worked good enough. Amazon, their simple solution when they started was just to say, people who bought this also bought, and they kept track of what they bought, and that was that. There wasn't anything else in it. It was the first 5 books that were bought along with a book when it was newly listed. Nothing to it. And that's very smart. It was very smart. People who bought this book also bought. No implication that we can guess what you're going to buy next, because you're not going to, right? And when they tried, they failed abysmally. I like that word, abysmally. That means bad. They did bad. Okay, so hyperfocus on novel methods. Everybody wants to talk about the statistical method. They don't want to talk about the results. High impact results that even hint at the word application seems to spoil the paper for reviewers, and research is marginalized. But the first image of a black hole was produced with machine learning. The most accurate predictions of protein structures were produced with machine learning. And as you saw yesterday, the idea of dramatically improving streaming is greatly assisted, and video production with machine learning, right? All of that. And imaging for medicine took that application and applied it. And now can image at 1/4 the speed. Fast. Which keeps you out of the MRI machine and lets somebody else use it. Okay, the other thing is that with these research projects, they use these benchmark data sets, like the Netflix thing. Netflix, said, okay, here's our data, and beat it, beat the predictions. And the dependent variable was probably, okay, here's the set of predictions we made, and here's the likelihood of a person clicking on one of the predictions. And it's, let's say, 20%. And if you moved it up to 21% or 22% or something, well, that's good for you. And that's at least real-world data, so it may not have been that. It probably was a static one that had the dependent variable already figured out. But these data sets have biases. More than half the images in ImageNet come from the U.S. and Great Britain, which means that there's some geographic skews in it. Popular face data sets, such as AT&T data of faces, contain primarily light-skinned male subjects. So dark-skinned women get misclassified. Doesn't recognize them. Okay. Researchers are trying to outdo one another on contrived benchmarks, while 1 in every 9 people in the world is starving, which has gone down quite a bit, but it's still a big problem. That's a lot of people, right? 300 million people or something. When studies on, 600 million. Yes, big. So when studies on real-world applications of machine learning are excluded from the mainstream, it's difficult for researchers to see the impact of their biased models. So they just focus on this one thing. They can't see that they're actually building in bias. Okay? Also, applying methods that exist require significant algorithmic and engineering work. We've been working on our process for 25 years, and it's fairly bulletproof. And one benefit of that is you don't have to worry that the machine's going to pull the opposite of what you expect. I've seen it happen in the real world. Almost put a little catalog company, retailer, out of business. We figured out what was going on, but they had dropped 3 times to their worst names because someone scored something backwards. It made perfect sense. It's very logical what the programmer did. It was just completely wrong and not what the industry did. Industries are peculiar. Okay, predicting normal heart function. They were talking about how they're trying to predict electrocardiogram analysis, which is kind of vague, little blips. But rather than trying to beat a physician's ability to predict heart disease, but predicting normal heart function would actually save cardiologists more time by identifying patients who do not need their expertise. So in our case, everybody wants to predict who's going to be their next great customer so that they can go after them and be nice to them. Very difficult. Probably doesn't work. It's easier to figure out who probably isn't going to be a good customer and kind of ignore them. Do a lot less for them. See what they do. Now, of course, that also changes the model and can eliminate some percentage of those in the bad category that would have or might have gone on to become great customers. Change the application, you change the model. Just the way it is. So Hannah was talking about optimized grape yields is what everybody wants to apply machine learning, but winemakers are looking for a combination of the right levels of sugar and acid and not just big wine berries. So this is complicated stuff, but it harkens to what I've always suspected, that my modeling is not considered academic, even though it works. Works over and over and over, makes tons of money, helps the valuation. And that's the way the academic world is. For the world to benefit from machine learning, the community must again ask itself, what is the field's objective function? In my case, we're trying to pick the best customers. We're not trying to pick the ones who will necessarily become the best. But for right now, we're trying to mail to people who want to get the mail and are most likely to buy. And that's our test. Okay, now how do you build great direct mail that beats your competition, that beats other methodologies? And I've been wanting to get to Summer and I become friends over LinkedIn. I don't think we've ever met, but we ought to. Anyway, in 2020, there is a real digital fatigue. Okay, what's digital fatigue? It's the ability to read articles in read mode in Firefox. You can hit a button, all the ads disappear. I don't even have to ignore the ads. They're just not there. They're gone. It's great. What a wonderful tool. I think Chrome has the same thing, and Opera, which I use quite a bit. So direct mail is a smart way to convert products. Direct mail shift the brain into a deeper level of engagement. Okay. Also, I've noticed that you are likely to engage in with a decision maker, even though there are multiple devices and multiple people in a household. So I pick up the mail. My wife reads the mail. And that may seem like a trivial distinction, but it's not. Not at all. So, I look through it when I get it, in case I drop something on the driveway, which happened a couple of weeks ago. My machine tool, which is my motorcycle, has a gap in the windshield. So I just throw the stuff in the front of the windshield, and actually a check fell through. And I got home and there wasn't the check. So I do kind of look through it, and if there's a Land's End catalog or a hunting catalog, I might pull those out because she will consider those junk. She buys from other places. Although I did get her a big Land's End order last winter because they have stuff that keeps her warm. And they had it in stock, and that was all good. Okay, so mail finds the decision maker because the decision maker decides what to throw away. But you have to interrupt if you want a couple of things in there. But mostly I don't care. And she said, don't you read the mail? I said, no, I look at the mail. You read the mail. Decision maker. Got that? It's another level that we have ignored in mail. Higher engagement. Your brain has more touch receptors, 10 times more than vision receptors. Think about that. 10 times more. Touch, smell, tactile, all of it. Weight. It's also physical. If you don't throw it away, they will pile up. It's also has implications that if you get a summons or some other tax letter, you might go to prison if you don't read your mail. Or you might get your driver's license suspended. Happened to my son. All he had to do was read the mail. And physically mail some money or do something, but he did it on his phone, and somehow that got lost, and it just led to a whole chain of events that was over a disputed $20 parking ticket. Read your mail. He says, oh, yeah, you're such a boomer. Anyway, attention-getting graphics and copy, but sometimes attention-getting means awful-looking. You ever wonder why we call it junk mail? Because sometimes junk mail, images, I did a case study a couple of weeks ago where I mentioned a guy had put together a mailer that looked like a ransom note with the letters, the words literally cut out of like magazines and stuff and glued together. This was in the old days. And it did pretty well. And he thought, well, if I got a real professional to make it really look great, We actually even glued a piece of the strapping that he was selling onto the mailing piece. Did terrible. They didn't believe it was a good deal because it was just too pretty. Images of people. Yeah, sometimes. But your wife and kids might not be as good as happy customers. Keep that in mind. Integration. Integration, I'm a big fan of QR codes. We get a 14% lift putting a QR code on there. Test it. I'm not saying it's the best. But I did ask, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Daniel from Land's End. He was on a program, and he's on another one with Namoa this week, so tune in. I think it's today or tomorrow. I think the 20th. Yeah, tomorrow. And I noticed that they put QR codes on the back cover items. I think I have it here. Yes, I do. Land's End. See, whoops. Over there, the chino pants. And there's your QR code right there. Okay, and I asked him how it worked, and he didn't really say. But it hasn't made it into the inner of the catalog, so I'm guessing that they're still testing, which is another thing you can do. Make it fun. Keep it simple. Keep your copy easy to understand. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean short. I get a little tired of catalogs where you don't get the dimensions, you don't get anything. It's just a picture of an item that then you have to go to the web to find out about. Land's End got started with long copy. They've kind of gone away from that. You can see there's not much here on the chino pants. And maybe they know what the chino pants look like. But they have done it. And see, I would say they need a little more copy because like this spread has basically nothing. Maybe I should switch, but anyway, I'll go through there. Basically no copy. So maybe I'll talk to Daniel about that. He's the creative director testing copy. And sometimes you can do a test with black plate change, which is really inexpensive. You don't have to change the 4 color images. Okay, consistency, mailing regularly. Jack Miller and I got to be friends, and I heard him give a talk to his employees one time. And Jack said, in the 70s, there was rampant runaway inflation. 20% per year, and in some countries it was way more than that. Argentina, Brazil, and they kind of thought that it was okay. But it isn't, because it robs savings, makes savings untenable. So Jack said, we would put out a catalog once a year, and our prices were way too cheap, or we had to put them way too high at the beginning of the year. And so we decided to start doing monthly mailers. And we thought we'd probably lose a lot of money. They were a little smaller. They were more like a 48 or 64 page catalog than a big perfect bound. And he said, but we decided we had to do it because it was the only way we could keep our prices up to date. So we were going to bite the bullet and just do it. And that was that mistake that we weren't trying to do anything for our customers really, except keep the prices current. It was purely defensive. He said that built our business. That made our business. All of a sudden, we weren't just a mail order company that you could occasionally find something to buy, that you couldn't find at your local office supply store, which typically wasn't really even a local office supply store. It was shipping stuff out of a big warehouse in New Jersey, and they would hand you a catalog. And you think it was the local guy downtown, but 99% of his inventory was in New Jersey. So Quill was actually a better bet than that. Got there quicker. But because they were on the desk on a regular basis, it exploded. It exploded the business. I heard that right from Jack's mouth, and it speaks to this consistency idea. Now, on the other hand, Baseball Express, a client of ours, was mailing regularly to mainly high school hardball players, and they bought a company called Softball Exchange, I think it was, and they thought, well, this was a black and white catalog, went out once a year, and at low prices, and they thought that Baseball Express management thought that if they bought this catalog and made it 4-color and really mailed it more frequently, that the softball players would care and it would make a lot more money. And so they applied that to the valuation and offered them quite a bit. I think the softball, I don't know, whatever the softball was called, was twice a year, I guess. But it turned out that the softball players were very different than the hardball, high school serious players. The serious players wanted the best bat, the newest bat. They wanted the best shoes. They largely bought their own equipment. In college, equipment was mostly provided. Sponsorships were big. In pro baseball, equipment was provided. So once you got, it was, the little league and the hardball players, but wanted the best equipment. Then there wasn't an easy way to get it. You weren't going to get it from your high school. The softball players, on the other hand, were mainly drinking beer, playing at the Fireman's Park, and they had their glove that they got in grade school, which was me, really, basically. Or maybe I played a little high school ball, not very little. So I had a good glove, and that's all. It didn't matter, and we drank beer and had a good time. And so we just didn't buy the newest stuff. We didn't care. And so all of these rules, testing is everything. Okay, personalization, use your data. Yeah, well, that's the trouble. If you just read the previous article, there aren't many real machine learning applications to segment your customers. And if you ask a printer how many people use really serious personalization, do different versions of their catalog or different versions of their mailer for different customer segments that they have, most of them don't know what the customer segments they have are. This stuff is diabolically difficult to predict. And for about 18 months with Musician's Friend, we created a guitar catalog, a drummer catalog, a DJ catalog, and there was some consistency across that. But what would happen was we could tell the difference between the drummers and the guitar players, and they were geodemographically different. But when we'd mail the drum catalog, the drummers would buy guitars, beginner guitars or inexpensive guitars. And when we mailed the guitar catalog to the guitar players, they'd buy drums because they already had a good guitar. It's not as easy as you think. And with modeling, you can do it. But without modeling, it's probably a complete disaster. And, oh, by the way, at Baseball Express, when we came out with the fast pitch softball, because that was much more like the hardball catalog, it was girls who were serious, we were able to model very, very carefully to make sure that the girls got the softball fast pitch, but the firemen didn't. And if in doubt, mail the fireman catalog, because the girls were used to getting that. But we thought that the firemen would disconnect and short circuit their brain. We did the same thing with Pet Edge, where we segmented the clipper market. We discovered the clipper market, which was actually bigger than the dog grooming market, and we created a new version. And we were able to grow that 20%. It had not grown in years. We were able to grow it 20% in a recession, and then 20%, and then 20% more for 3 successive years. So we pretty nearly doubled the size of the company, right? And that was through modeling and using data, but it isn't simple. They'd been in business like 40 years and weren't growing, okay? So if you want to do this stuff, test it and get somebody with proven modeling skills. Have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will know you're smart.